this is kind of, I don't know if it's a funny story, but it was a little weird. When I was in France, I was enjoying it so much that I was like, maybe I'm going to take a gap year and come back to France. I don't know, maybe I was kind of testing the waters. And I told Madame Fair about that. And she said, well, let's talk to some of your teachers and maybe they have connections and like you could come back here and you love your host family. And my host family actually said I could stay with them if I came back. So she kind of started trying to connect me. And I remember we all went to dinner at one of the French teachers' houses one night. And this French teacher was very funny. It might have been the French teacher who was American, but she had lived in France most of her life and spoke, she was completely bilingual. And she had us over to her house. And I remember she was like playing this music video in French about this guy smoking a lot of weed, and like she was just having such a great night. And then maybe she was high at the time, I don't know. But I just remember her putting that music video on YouTube as we were all sitting around the table. And then she goes, Audrey, my neighbors are looking for an au pair, for a nanny to come live with them. Do you want to go meet them? And so Madame Fair kind of looks at me like, you're gonna go, right?
Welcome, guys. Today I am joined by the lovely Audrey Hood. Audrey's in Indiana. I'm in Brazil. But somehow, thanks to the power of the internet, the power of Zoom, we've been able to make this long-awaited reunion happen. Audrey and I were just talking about the last time one of our first interactions was literally our very first English class. It was a legendary, very memorable English class. Tarun was in it. We talked about that. So yeah, maybe we can start off with high school. What was high school Audrey like? And then we can transition towards,
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for having me, Kevin. And I'm really excited to see you again and talk with you. And that English class was a lot of fun. Tarun, if you're watching, I liked your story about your stuffed animal panda, as we were talking about. So high school, Audrey, I think I'm largely the same in some ways. I was always very kind of shy, but also giggly. I like to laugh. I enjoy talking with people. And I think I was probably mostly like that in high school, but maybe more reserved. One of my regrets was that I didn't do more extracurriculars, and I was a day student, and I always wished I was a little bit more involved in the boarding student community. I have some really close boarding student friends from Exeter, but I largely kind of remained in a day-to-day day student circle. So I always wished I got beyond that a little bit, but my experience with Exeter started off kind of tumultuously because I was waitlisted at Exeter and I got in like 1 or 2 weeks before school started to Exeter. And the even crazier part of that was that I didn't know that I was on the wait list for Exeter still, because I remember I applied to Exeter. I was kind of into it. I grew up in the area, and we used to drive through campus to visit my grandfather, who lived in one of the retirement homes in Exeter, and I was in Portsmouth, so maybe oftentimes Exeter students like to go to Portsmouth on the weekend or something. And so that's where I was. And my parents would say, maybe you could go here one day if you were interested. And I was like, okay, cool. And they had me apply and I had my interview and I think I liked it. I was a little intimidated, wasn't quite sure that I wanted to go. And so when I got waitlisted, I think I just thought, it's not for me. I wasn't good enough, didn't quite make it. I just want to go to the public high school in Portsmouth, and that's that. And I told my mom, I said, take me off the wait list. I was very dramatic about it. I said, take my name off that. I don't want to be on that anymore. And she said, okay. Then the school year ended of 8th grade and summer went on and I changed my mind, as in a nutshell. I was basically like, I'd really like to go to Exeter, actually. And I thought that I was off the wait list. So I was making plans to apply freshman year of high school. And I was going to write a letter to admissions and say, I regret that I turned down an opportunity. And I remember actually drafting that letter, like on a piece of lined, like legal paper or something. Like I was actually going to send it. And then one day I was working as a summer camp counselor, and one day my mom picked me up from work and she goes, well, I got a phone call today and you got into Exeter. And I was so excited and I had no idea. So she just, sneaky little mom over there, knew what was best for me as usual. And she kept me on the list because she thought I would change my mind, and I did. And so, a week or two later, she was dropping me off for my first day at Exeter. Thank goodness I wasn't a boarding student, because that would have been a horrifying transition so quick. But it was still a lot. So I think I was really excited, and I always loved Exeter. I had a overall very positive experience there, but I think I did go in with the sense that I was below maybe other people who had gotten directly admitted, and I hadn't had enough time to mentally prepare. And so I think I needed a little bit more self-assurance, and it took me longer to get to that, but I eventually did, and kind of began to feel really comfortable at Exeter. I was really involved in music ensembles. I play the violin, so I was in a lot of orchestras and took lessons. Those were my main extracurriculars. And then I really liked French, which we'll probably talk about later because I ended up studying it. But I was always taking French classes, involved in French club, and ended up studying abroad in France as well. So I think, yeah, there might have been some clubs interspersed throughout there, but those were sort of my main involvements. You probably would have seen me on campus with Claire Hawkins, Kate Martell, Megan Tangway, and Raghav Bhatt. Most of the time. They're kind of my buddies, and probably in the library a lot, which is where the older day students kind of live. Maybe that was foreshadowing for my future career.
Awesome. Yeah, what a squad. What a squad. Raghav reached out, and he's doing well as well. So that was high school, Audrey. And how did some of your passions, interests, whether they were extracurricular or academic, evolve when you got to college?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to study French. I think from the time I was at Exeter, I envisioned myself getting a degree in French. And that was solidified when I studied abroad senior fall in France, and just had a fabulous time there. I enjoyed it so much, and I loved my host family, just had a really positive experience. And I always loved the French language. I liked French culture, but I think I was mostly interested in it globally as a language, and the history of where it's spoken, why it's spoken in those places, and the literature and the film that comes out of that. So it wasn't this kind of romantic love of Parisian culture or something that people envision, but I did really connect with it. And so I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, sort of mentality, but I did think that I wanted to study French. And so I looked at schools with good language programs, and I didn't apply to very many colleges. That was a regret of mine. I wish I applied to more, and the reason that I regret not doing that is because my reasoning, kind of again, coming full circle, was that I wasn't good enough for a lot of the more competitive colleges. And I don't regret where I ended up, but I just wish that hadn't been my thought process, because I think I sold myself short. So I applied to Indiana University, Kenyon College, and Oberlin College. And Kenyon and Oberlin are both small liberal arts colleges in Ohio. And then I applied to the University of New Hampshire, which was my state university and my kind of in-state option. I did get into all of them, but I still was like, oh man, I should have applied to more schools. I should have just, to heck with it. I should have just taken the chance. What was I, so afraid of? So I think I was kind of stressed and unsure of how to choose which college I was going to go to. And so I ended up actually going to the University of New Hampshire for my first year of college, and then I would later transfer. And I went there partially because it was, well, actually mostly because it was really cheap. My dad was in his last year of being a professor there, so I got in-state tuition and a huge discount because he was there. I mean, I think it was, about $5,000 after him, in state, and I think a couple scholarships I got, to go, which was insane. And I didn't want to turn that down. I didn't want to have student loans. That was another goal of mine when I applied to college. And I knew that there was some where I would and some where I wouldn't. So I didn't want to go to the ones where I would. So anyway, I declared a French degree at the University of New Hampshire. I went there for a year. I had a fabulous time. I made wonderful friends. It was so refreshing. It was what I needed. I just stayed home, basically. It was 15 minutes away from home. I lived there at the college, but I just got a little bit of a break. But unfortunately, their French department was pretty lacking. It was kind of dying out. There were fewer and fewer French professors there. And I think if I had chosen another major, I might have stayed there. They have a very strong marine biology program, for example. Maybe if I had been doing that, I would have stayed because I loved it. But they didn't. And I knew that I still wanted to study French. My passion was reinvigorated, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So actually, without telling my parents, because I think they were a little disappointed that I didn't go right off to IU or Kenyon or Oberlin, just because I think they were excited for me and they knew that I would like that sort of thing. I didn't tell them, but I applied to transfer to Indiana University, to IU, with a French major. And either once I had applied or once I got in, I told them, and they were really excited and really supportive. And so I went off there and transferred into my sophomore year at IU. And IU was fabulous. Transferring was a nightmare. It was a total headache. I would encourage people to think about transferring because it's a really good option, especially if you don't know what you're going to do, but do your research. I didn't. Just get your credits in line and it'll save you. It'll save you just headaches and stress when you could just be enjoying yourself. So that was the one caveat. But I went to IU and they have a fabulous French program, and I did not regret it at all. I just met the most wonderful professors and had the most wonderful opportunities. It's a Big Ten school. It's a huge research institution. And I would highly encourage people to think of state universities when they're applying to college, because they have a wealth of resources that sometimes is not apparent on the surface, but they tend to have really good funding. IU has wonderful funding for the arts and humanities, which unfortunately the school I went to did not anymore. And a lot of schools are losing that funding, but IU has a lot of money there, and they have beautiful buildings and wonderful classes and lots of professors there to make sure that you have a really wonderful experience. So I would encourage people to look at those schools. And it's a little easier to get opportunities sometimes because it's such a big school and there are so many of them. And they can sometimes be less competitive in a way because not everyone's applying to the one single opportunity there, or something like that. And let's see. I continued there. I studied abroad in France again. Over the course of these years, I continued an interest that I had developed at Exeter, which was Senegalese literature and film. And at Exeter, I wouldn't be surprised if it's still a part of the French curriculum there, but I don't know for sure. I think in about third year French class, we watched a film called La Noire d'Eux. And in English, it's usually translated to Black Girl. And it was made by a cinematographer named Ousmane Sembene. And he is pretty well known and commonly referred to as the father of African cinema. And I was enchanted by his films, and he has many of them. You can watch La Noire d'Eux on YouTube, and some of his other ones, not all of them, but you can, that one's easy to access. And he also wrote a lot of novels, and I did an independent study with Kitty Fair, who is an amazing teacher. I think she's still there. She's wonderful. And I read some of his novels for that, and I just fell in love with them. I thought that his stories were beautiful. I was really interested in Senegalese history. Senegal was a French colony, and I was interested in colonial and post-colonial literature and film in Senegal because it's just such a rich area of art, and it's absolutely stunning and beautiful. And I could go on about it, but I'll spare you. But when I went to IU, there were many professors there who also loved Ousmane Sembene. And one of his contemporaries, whose name is Paul Vieira, And Paulin Vieira was I think a little older than Sembene, and he made some of the earliest African films. Kind of, these two were both operating in the mid 20th century, mid to late 20th century. So I loved both of these filmmakers and writers. And as it turned out, I started super randomly working at the Rare Books and Manuscripts Library at IU. And they obtained or purchased really a portion of Ousmane Sembene's archive. So all of these like film scripts and letters and journals and novel drafts that he had written, they obtained. And his archive is spread throughout the world. It's everywhere. It's huge. So this is a portion of it. I was so excited because I got to physically have my hands on, items that he had touched and written, and that was so special to me. And they're actually working on getting the other one, Paulin Vieira's archive, over to IU, and I was kind of involved in that process as well through some other jobs that I had while I was there. And I connected with his son, actually, who lives in France and is continuing his father's legacy, basically. And I wrote articles with him and connected with him and other teachers. And it was just wonderful. It was one of those, if you just pick something you're really passionate about, even if you don't get a degree in it and you follow it, you're going to meet people who you love and connect with because they share that interest, right? And it was just one of those wonderful moments. So that was a little long-winded, but that was sort of my experience academically anyway in college.
Wow, Audrey, that was amazing. I love how passionate you sound, even just talking about it now. Yeah, the genuine curiosity you had towards this subject. So let me get this straight, but when you set foot at Exeter, did you know any French at all?
I mean, I think I took it in middle school, but no, essentially. Okay. No, I mean, I think I took the placement test and just went into the first French class. So really, no, I didn't, but I loved it from day one. I remember that I loved French from day one, and I have no idea why. It's kind of arbitrary in some ways. I have a little French heritage in terms of like French Canadian heritage, but I don't think that was really the reason. I honestly have no idea, but it caught my heart.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about the language department at Exeter, but it's fantastic because my Spanish, again, middle school Spanish, but then by the time I came out, I was fluent, and I did a little study abroad. That always helps. Yeah, maybe we can talk more about that. So you went to France twice. Mm-hmm. You have any special stories you want to share? Maybe you could also compare and contrast your first versus your second visit. What was that like?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, there are so many stories. I'll have to try and you. Yeah. So the first time I went to France was senior of high school in the fall in a city called Grenoble. It's in the Alps. It's a kind of a ski town, sporty. Sometimes people comment it doesn't look like, the typical French city. It does to me in a way, but I know what people mean when they say that. It has this kind of like modern, sporty, outdoorsy twist to it. And so that was my first, I actually think I had traveled to France once on a brief vacation with my parents, but that was when I was a lot younger. So it was really my first kind of experience in France. And I lived with a host family there, and as did every other student. There were only like 7 of us. Well, I mean, I guess I could name everyone, but they know who they are. Though I think you mentioned Sean Taylor in one of your interviews, and he was one of the students who went there. And so we were a very, very small group. It was pretty sheltered. We lived with host families, but we only went to classes together, and we had Kitty Fair, who we called Madame Fair, while we were there. She taught some classes with us, but we also had French teachers come into our classes and teach just us. So it was sort of like mixed between an Exeter experience and, complete like immersion into, French society. And I knew I was going to love the classes because I loved them at Exeter, and they were still, Harkness method kind of vibe, really discussion based. We did a lot of speaking, and it was really nice. They were only about half a day, and every Thursdays were excursion day. So we had a lot of free time. Maybe too much free time, which was really fun. And, you mentioned Emma Kim talking about burnout as well. I think, everyone's really tired senior fall. You're applying to colleges. You're really stressed. It was a great getaway. That was really nice. So I think it was just refreshing. And I was so lucky. I really connected with my host family. And I did go back and visit them the second time I went to France. And they just felt like it was one of those experiences where just a family across the globe feels like they could have been the family you grew up in, They were great. And I always wanted siblings. I'm an only child, always wanted siblings. And I had 3 host siblings. So I was vibing along with the host. I was so excited. Just like the mere fact that I was going to have host siblings was so exciting, and they were all wonderful. That made my experience really fun, and I just had a good time with the other students in the program too. I remember we all hung out a lot, and I remember I did have funny memories with Sean. I was trying to remember this the other day for some reason. Poor Sean, if he watches this, I hope this isn't embarrassing or something, or maybe he can remember the song I'm talking about, but he used to like dance down the street after class to this song, and I don't remember what it was, but he was just so funny about it. I don't know how to describe it. He would almost do kind of like a whip down the street or something. Like, I just remember Sean getting out of class and he was just so excited to go out and explore this French city, and it was contagious, and he was so hilarious about it. And he was really he would invite us all to come visit back at his host family's apartment, or we'd go to a coffee shop or hang out or something like that. So I have very fond memories of that, and watching Sean dancing on the street, which was always kind of a good time. And we went on lots of fun trips. We visited a monastery one time that was really cool, and we went to Paris for I think a week, maybe even a little longer. So we went on just some kind of delightful excursions. And Megan Smith was also there as well, and a few other students, all of whom Peace Kabari. I'm just going to start naming them throughout as I recount these. But they were all super lovely. And I remember Peace actually came and stayed at my house the night before we left for France, because we had the same flight, and my parents drove us to the airport, and we lived kind of nearby in the same state at least. And I remember that was so much fun to have her come and hang out. And we were so excited to go on this adventure to France. And then we met everyone at the airport. And everyone was just so pumped. And Madame Fair just put up with so much because we were so goofy a lot of the time. But she totally encouraged it, and she just wanted us to speak French. As long as we spoke French, she, I think, didn't care if we were goofing off, because she was just, happy to see us just enjoying life. Actually, this is kind of, I don't know if it's a funny story, but it was a little weird. When I was in France, I was enjoying it so much that I was like, maybe I'm going to take a gap year and come back to France. I don't know, maybe I was kind of testing the waters. And I told Madame Fair about that, and she said, well, let's talk to some of your teachers, and maybe they have connections, and you could come back here, and you love your host family. And my host family actually said I could stay with them if I came back. So she kind of started trying to connect me. And I remember we all went to dinner at one of the French teachers' houses one night. And this French teacher was very funny. It might have been the French teacher who was American, but she had lived in France most of her life, and spoke, she was completely bilingual. And she had us over to her house. And I remember she was playing this music video in French about this guy smoking a lot of weed, and she was just having such a great night. And then maybe she was high at the time, I don't know. But I just remember her putting that music video on YouTube as we were all sitting around the table. And then she goes, Audrey, my neighbors are looking for an au pair, for a nanny to come live with them. Do you want to go meet them? And so Madame Fair kind of looks at me like, you're gonna go, right? And this is all happening in French. And so I'm like, hopefully I'm understanding this correctly. She takes me over to the neighbor's house and leaves me there. Like she just drops me off. And so I'm talking to these neighbors and they had like a little baby and maybe a little toddler, maybe. I just remember that these people were like the weirdest people. And they gave me really creepy vibes. And I couldn't quite pinpoint why, but I just knew I was like, I could never live in their house. Like it was when you feel like you're being watched, you ever go, maybe they legitimately had a lot of security cameras, like something like that. Like it was just weird. Like I felt so observed. And I remember I just felt so awkward the entire conversation because I knew from the minute I walked in that we just weren't gonna work out, me and this family. And I was like, back up. Like, not gonna happen. And I stayed there for like an hour talking to them. And then I finally went back to the dinner and everyone was still like around the table listening to YouTube videos. And I just kind of sat back down and I looked at Madame Fair and I was like, not gonna happen. She was like, understood. So that was kind of a funny memory. And I didn't end up going back. Yeah, it's just like one of those like, oh my God, I was like 16. Like, what the heck? And I think I also, to poor Madame Fair's credit, I think she thought that teacher was staying with me at the house. So no neglect occurred, but it was just funny. But anyway, I didn't end up taking a gap year in France, but I did go back to a different town further south, Aix-en-Provence. And it's known for being like the town where like Cézanne went to and had a house and made his beautiful Southern France paintings and things like that. And it's known, I think, as the city of like a city of a million things, like the city of light and the city of fountains. And it's a very beautiful kind of golden French city. And I went with my best friend from IU, and we actually ended up being roommates with a host family there, which was really fun, totally random. And that was a bit more like we were rooming there and we weren't so sheltered. We were just going to the French university and we had dinner with them every night. But otherwise, like we lived in an apartment in their basement, didn't really interact too much. And this experience in France it was still good. It wasn't as pure and innocent as the senior fall in Grenoble was. I don't know. I just didn't quite click with it. I had a good time and I love my dear friends so much. That was a ton of fun. And we did some fun traveling. I didn't connect with the city too much. I thought we encountered a lot of really aggressive men in the area. I didn't really like that. I didn't like feeling unsafe walking home at night. I never felt like that in Grenoble. Maybe that was just because I was younger. I don't know. But I think, I don't know, maybe my other classmates from Grenoble would kind of agree with that, depending on other, travel experiences they've had. But I kind of just felt like that whole area I was in, I always just kind of felt not at ease. And I actually ended up having this, when I was at the French university, I had this French professor like attempt to seduce me. It was really wild. And it's just unfortunate, I can laugh about it now because it was just so ridiculous. And, luckily I escaped with, quote unquote, not much harm done. Just, that is to say that I didn't find myself too heavily emotionally impacted in the long run by it. But it was, it was just kind of upsetting and it was just sort of an eye roll. I was like, this is dumb. I wish that this didn't happen. And I luckily was able to leave that class, and IU was very supportive and my American university had my back, which was really great. Nothing really happened to him. I don't think he faced any sort of consequence, but so I think that added a bit of a bitter note. However, it was still a lot of fun, and it was it's always refreshing to have a change of pace, especially when you're at the end of your schooling. So I feel like my experiences there, were slightly tainted, but I was still happy to have gone. And I did have some really fun times. The group I went with was really great. And this Swedish girl lived with me and my roommate for a while with the host family. She was hysterical. So Anyway, I guess those are kind of some stories from those study abroads. But I would say to people wanting to study abroad, don't let fear necessarily stop you from doing that. Because I'm not the only woman to say that that particular city in France is not the only place you're going to potentially encounter something like that. So I would encourage people to still go out of their comfort zones if they're able to, because traveling is really valuable.
Totally. I really regret not studying abroad, both at Exeter and in college. That was so sad. So now I'm trying to travel. I'm in Brazil.
Yeah, that's great.
But unfortunately, we're in lockdown. But yeah, I mean, those stories you shared were fantastic. I love the Sean. I could have totally imagined him whipping down a little French street. And then the nanny story. Wow. So maybe we can talk a little bit about your foray into the world of librarianship. I'm really excited about this, and I know nothing about this world that you are so, like, I learned so much about French and Senegalese film just in this past 30 minutes. But yeah, tell me about librarianship. What's that like?
Yeah, so, oh my gosh, I love being a librarian. Granted, I haven't been one, for super long, but I knew I was going to love it. And my assumptions were confirmed when I actually started working as a librarian. I didn't decide I wanted to be a librarian until the end of college, when I found out that IU has a great library science program. And I didn't really know that going in. I think I found out maybe my end of my sophomore, beginning of my junior year. It's funny because I always loved libraries. Even as a kid, I loved going to the library. I had such a little natural high from that. Like, I was so giddy when my parents would take me to the library. I just thought it was like the best thing on the planet. Like that and like going to Home Depot were like the highlights of my childhood. So I'm surprised that I didn't think of that earlier as a career path. But anyway, as I mentioned before, I randomly got a job at the Rare Books and Manuscripts Library at IU. And that was because I was taking a mandatory career class and I had to go interview like a random career professional on campus. And for some reason, I landed on that library. I can't even remember why. I think I just had never been in and I thought it was kind of cool. And actually, oh my gosh, it's so cringy looking back. But I emailed like the director of the library and was like, hey, can I job shadow you? And he emailed me back and he's like, I don't have enough time, but here's a colleague who can like talk to you for like an hour. But I just remember thinking, it was a cool building and I didn't know anything about Rare Books and Manuscripts. So anyway, I went to interview this woman and she offered me a job. During it, she was like, hey, do you want to work here? Because we need people and you seem cool. And so I started and I was in their public services department in kind of like a reference sort of position. And so I worked in the reading room at the Rare Books Library because it was rare books, you couldn't check them out. So you had to read them in, a designated space. And I started working in there and I thought the materials were really cool. And as I mentioned, that the archive of Ousmane Sembene ended up coming there, which was really exciting for me. And so I just kept working there. I worked at the Black Film Center and Archive at IU as well, and a couple other places. And I started thinking, hey, this library thing is kind of fun. And so then they had an accelerated master's degree. So if you had, room in your senior year schedule, you could do your first year in advance. So that's awesome. What I did. I applied and I did my first year. I finished that last year. So it ended, kind of in COVID and online classes, continued over the summer. And it's only a 2-year program. So now I'm about to graduate in May, which is really exciting. And I just so happened to get a job a little prematurely as a reference librarian in a town in Indiana near where IU is. And it's where my boyfriend lives. And I went out with him. We were both back at my parents, who now live in Maine, during COVID. We were both living with them for a while. And then I went back to Indiana with him, kind of just thinking like to stay for a while and just do classes and go back to my parents, a month or 2 later. But this reference librarian job opened up at the local public library and I applied for it because I was so nervous about getting a job. It was occupying all my time because librarian jobs are kind of hard to come by, not super, super difficult, but it's, it's kind of like a teacher. It's like there are only so many English teacher positions in, a region, right? So it's kind of like that. I was just convinced I was never going to get a job and I wasn't qualified for anything and it was going to be horrible. Then I applied and I got the job. So also advice I would say is just, apply, because why the heck not? You might have underestimated yourself. But I guess backing up before I talk about what I actually do in that job, just to sort of my inspiration for becoming a librarian is really has to do a lot with information literacy. Librarians are information professionals. And, kind of the running joke is, like librarians like to read a lot. I do happen to like to read a lot. Probably many librarians do, but it's really about connecting people with information that they need or that they desire. And actually at IU anyway, the library science program is part of the School of Informatics. So that can help people think about it in a different way, right? Like it's not in the, College of Arts and Sciences or something, it's in the School of Informatics. So there are a lot of overlaps between librarianship and things like IT, for example. And a lot of library science students have data science concentrations. I personally didn't. Yeah. And I took some comp sci classes and web design and sort of more IT oriented things like that for my degree as well. So it's a changing and developing field, which is really exciting. And you can do so many things with that. Librarians, I mean, they work in IT, they work in traditional libraries, they work in hospitals, they work in corporations. Librarians are everywhere and you just don't know it. They're just sneaky little people. I think I just always felt, and I think this goes back to my beginnings at Exeter, I think I always took people's desire for information really seriously. And I think that there are so many people who think they're not worthy of important information. And I think that's wrong, that people are made to feel like that in the world that we live in. I think that everyone is entitled to data and to information and to knowledge. And that is very, very important to me. And it's my motivating factor for the job that I do. And I love working as a reference librarian, specifically because reference librarians connect people to information that they need from day to day. And that spans so many different things. It could be really in-depth research projects, which can be kind of fun, and it can kind of throw me back to, my like French literature days or something. But there are people who come in who need their social security, or they need to file their taxes. And there are people who come in who want to take pleasure in something. They want a book to make them feel good. And I think that everyone deserves all of those things. Yeah. And I had this one experience one time with a gentleman who I was helping, and something that public librarians work with a lot is digital literacy. And there's a huge digital divide. There are so many people who don't have a good handle on how to use technology that is basically almost required for survival. And we librarians see a lot of that because those people come to the library. They know that the library will help them. The library, a public library, is one of the only places you can go for free and you can get an internet connection. And so people who need that kind of space go there. And I met a gentleman one time who was filing for unemployment, and I got him on the unemployment website, and he filled out the form and he tried to submit it and it wasn't submitting. And he was really frustrated and he was upset. And he kind of came over to me sort of on his way out and he said, "It's not working. I'm not going to do it." And so I said, "Could I look at it just once for you?" And so he said yes, and we went back over and I looked at his application and he missed one number on his driver's license number. And that was why he couldn't file for unemployment. That should never be the reason that someone doesn't get their unemployment. Yeah, I love being the person that can be that bridge, because it's just, those moments are great and makes me so sick to my stomach to think of that guy walking out of there if he hadn't stopped and mentioned the difficulty that he was having. Maybe we just never would have gotten that through.
Yeah,
So
totally.
that's why I love being a librarian. And I just like to see people's faces light up when something kind of goes their way and they get that information, because we need it to survive.
Wow, I resonate with so many of the things you said, Audrey. First of all, you are a good person and you are changing lives. Like, I am so inspired. I think what you're doing is incredibly noble. That's probably the word that I would use. And there's so many things that you mentioned that I can relate to. Like, my parents were filing for unemployment benefits and we were using our own home internet, which is great. But just the struggle of the, just how complicated sometimes these forms can be, and how many steps there are, and it was kind of ridiculous. Like, I could not figure this out, right? Like, the patience you have, in a way, like being a librarian, the way I see it from what you described, is both a very human job and also a very kind of like handling lots of data. So you are that bridge, like you mentioned. And this access to information, like, if someone's filing for unemployment or they need benefits, this is not just information. This is like security. Or if they're looking for a book, that's like access to an emotion, that's access to joy or peace in someone's chaotic life. So
Yes, exactly.
this is awesome. Like, what you're doing is fantastic. And now that I'm thinking about it, we live in we live in the information age, in the data age, where we have like so many data points, it's impossible for us to make sense of it. And I think that, over time, like, people like you are just going to get more and more valuable. So this is, I'm feeling like great. I don't know. This is so cool. It's like a job that I didn't even know. I didn't, never really considered. Don't think about it every day. But now that you brought it up, it just makes total sense.
Yeah, and it's one of those, I love the job too, because I I get paid to be nice to people every day and be helpful to people, and not to, I don't have like a motivation to sell them something besides to encourage them to come back to the library, because it hopefully is mutually beneficial. And I like that I can focus on making sure someone has a dignified experience working with me, and I don't have to worry that I'm gonna, face consequences because they didn't buy my product or something like that. And I just find that really refreshing, and I feel really lucky to have my day filled with those interactions.
Yeah, it's a sweet gig. Not to mention your boyfriend lives in the same town, so I'm sure that helps.
Yeah, well, that was yeah, that was great.
That's nice. I mean, this is coming from a guy who literally had to move to a different continent to see their loved one. So.
Well, it's okay. My boyfriend's from Rwanda, so.
Okay, gotcha.
I do understand, but he just lives here now.
Gotcha.
So we good for now.
Well, Audrey, this was fantastic. I mean, I asked just a few questions, but what you shared today was uplifting, it was inspiring, it was motivating, and I sure as heck learned a lot about French and Senegalese literature and film, as well as a little bit about your French study abroad experiences. I feel like for a second there, I was in France, believe it or not. So this was awesome. Thank you so much. It was great to hear some of these other names as well. Sean and Tarun, Megan, Peace. I managed volleyball, and Peace was a beast. I mean, at any basically sport she touched. I might get them on the show, interview them as well. It's always fun to have these little links. So I'll let them know that you mentioned them. Yeah. That's pretty much all the time we have left. If there's anything that you want to say before we sign off.
Oh, I mean, really just thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have any profound words of wisdom to depart at the end of the interview, but yeah. I hope that people can, find more solutions when they encounter problems. So a very librarian thing to say, but I hope that this can help that in some way.
Yeah, no worries. You've dropped more than enough wisdom in the last 45 minutes. Like I feel wiser. So thank you again, Audrey, so much. Not just for what you said, but I think that this was just a really uplifting chat. I feel better. You're a very bright person to be around, even virtually. So thank you so much for your time.
You as well, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right, we'll catch you at the next one. Bye.
Bye.